Welcome. Thanks for joining me. So I want to start with just uh, give me a little bit about your background. How did you get into composition, and specifically, how did the spiritual enter your compositional expertise?
Well, through high school and college, I was like most of us are. You sang in the choir from a very young age. Trevor, I fell in love with the spiritual. I don't know if it was uh, predetermined by forces unknown, but this genre of music just affected my soul at a very young age, and I've been in love with it ever since. And did I have a vision to become a professional composer? Absolutely not. I did not. It was not on my radar. It was not on a professional goal or anything. Just the evolution of it. It's just I don't know. Sometimes I sit back and wonder, wow, that really happened, And here it is, 20 years in. But it's been the most incredible journey ever. I believe the spiritual is just the foundation of African American music. And I believe music in general because it has impacted so many various genres of music. And I'm just glad to be playing a small role in that. And that's really what happened for me. I didn't go to college and say I'm going to be a composer and I want to write, a piece like Dvorak. You know, that was not on my radar. I just was enjoying what I was doing, more of a hobby than anything that turned into something very professional.
Yeah, that's fantastic. How would you say that the spiritual has contributed to your identity as a musician, especially given your prominence in the field of spiritual composition and arrangement?
Well, I think that the spiritual has always been that genre of music that that I was most attracted to, most drawn to. We like so many various styles of music in our lives: classical, rock, jazz, blues. It just the spectrum is wide. But this one, and I guess probably one of the most things that was captivating for me was when I think of a people, an oppressed people, who took a genre of music and developed it, used that genre of music to communicate amongst themselves, to survive and to persevere. I think that's absolute brilliance. And when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about the coded song, the slave songs, and how they were used, and the oppressor was unaware. Absolute brilliance. Absolute brilliance.
So, with that in mind, do you see a distinctly Michigan approach to the spiritual compared to other regions such as, the South, maybe the East Coast, West Coast, anything like that?
Well, I think it started off that way. I think we began to apply different techniques, different genres, blending of genres, if you'll have it. And I believe that now it's something that's just more universal than it was before when it first started. I think we had a little something to do with being innovative and especially merging hymns and gospel music into the spirituals. And I think it's just a part of the overall evolution of the spiritual from the 1800s to now. And it's just great to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's fantastic there. Um, Going back to you now, who were your most important influences as a musician growing up, as an adult, even as a professional that you are now?
Well, I probably the first person I would have to name is the great Hall Johnson. His approach to layering and even for his more complex arrangements and to his more simple arrangements. When I first experienced him, I was in college and we did his Elijah Rock. And I said, oh my God, if I could ever write like this one day. So he has always been inspirational. And the wonderful thing that I probably patterned a lot of my writings after was Mr. Johnson would be at a standard 1-4-5 chord progression. And then who told him that he could add a flat 5 and a 7 to that chord, you know? And then he would come right back to the more traditional point. The way he moved in and out with these wonderful jazz moments, I just thought was just incredible. And I said, you know, I think I want to take that from you, Mr. Johnson, and put it in some of my work. And that's really what I did. Of course, uh, William Dawson was he gave you the core of it, the beauty of the spiritual without a lot of different let me say jazz chords, contemporary chords. He was more traditional, but it worked so well because of how he voiced it. You know, he was probably to me one of the first composers who would make a simple ninth chord sound just glorious without doing any additional accidentals to the music. And I thought that was phenomenal. So I tried to hold on to a little of that. Probably for me, when Moses came and took the world by storm, Moses had a way of giving you liberty and creativity. That's what I took mostly from him. You know, he said, you know, why not? But to not let it get out of pocket where it wasn't unidentifiable as a spiritual. He taught me to infuse more of that in my writing. So for those three reasons, you know, those are my spiritual superstars, to have lack of another term.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What would you say draws you to the spiritual as a compositional medium?
The more I began to write, the more I began to clinic, the more I began to do workshops and commission, the more I realized and had it confirmed for me how this was a music for the people. And that continued the way it draws different faiths and different walks of life and definitely different ethnicities. It let me know one common thing, that music is for the people. And the spiritual, even born of those horrific circumstances, is still viable music for the people. I believe that it just connects in a very, very unique and great way. And so when I get to experience that with working with choirs and so forth, it just brings me joy, and it just reconfirms that this music is still as viable now as it was then.
Now, when you're composing and you're arranging these spirituals, do you consciously incorporate techniques and elements and stylistic features from other musical styles into your spirituals? And if so, how do you do that, or in what ways?
I believe it happens, but I think for me, as I'm composing, that isn't at the forefront of my thought process or my creative process. Probably what's at the forefront is, what can I do to hold on to the authenticity of this genre, but make it more progressive, because the ear of the singer, especially a young singer, I believe to be more developed than when we were younger. And I think that's something that we need to focus in on. So I just try to make the music as exciting, you know. If I'm doing this wonderful progression and it's moving, you know, what can I do? Can I layer the voices differently? Can I cross the voices over? Can I do something that's going to say, wow, never thought about the tenors or the altos singing that, changing the registers of which they normally operate. Those things are very intentional for me. If I'm going to set a piece, the first thing I have to ask myself is, what are you going to do differently, Gibbs? What are you going to do that hasn't been done, but to do enough to where the song is still recognizable? So that's always at the forefront. You know, what kind of motive can I introduce and add the melodic lines to give it its center, but give it activity in the other parts. So that's probably the first thing that I think of when I'm arranging a new setting.
Yeah, and sort of along that same line there, how do harmony, rhythm, and form function differently in your spirituals compared to other genres of choral music?
Well, for me, the rhythmic pulse is everything. I believe that if you can set a good pulse and a good tempo and a good medium where you can blend voices and a good vocal range, that for me is the beginning of an exciting piece of music. And I'm going to use one of my examples is when I decided to do arrangement for Michael Beard in Africa of Wade in the Water, which is a very, very common, very well-known spiritual setting, a spiritual. And I asked myself, what are you going to do differently? And the first question that I came up with was, water is beautiful, water is soothing, water is healing, water is all of those things that we enjoy from time to time in life. But the water is turbulent. The water is powerful. The water is just, it's very, very, very aggressive at times. So when I looked at Wade in the Water, I can imagine the transportation and migration of the slaves to the United States through Europe and Cuba and so forth. I began to envision how turbulent those waters had to be from time to time. So I wanted to depict the opening of that to be aggressive, to be assertive, to be rhythmic, to let you know there's no calm about this process. From time to time, not that all the scenarios were like that, but I suspect in that transportation and that migration that water probably became very, very, very wicked at times. And so I wanted to depict that. So for me, I try to connect imagery of what I think how something should be sung and try to write to create that that sound or that mindset. So when the singers are singing it, they can envision, oh, waters can be rough, we have hurricanes, and so we know that how unrelentless it can be. So I tried to infuse in that in those thoughts based on what I'm creating in my music.
Yeah, fantastic. So at this point, you're a very widely performed and celebrated arranger and composer. Many of your pieces are performed by educational ensembles, maybe high school ensembles, collegiate ensembles, community ensembles, all these different ensembles. How does knowing that impact your writing?
Well, it actually makes me a little nervous because I think that people naturally begin to build expectations, and you don't want to disappoint the people who have been so supportive to you over the years. So there's a little bit of anxiety. I don't know how other composers feel. Not anxiety in a way that it prevents me from creating, but it's just a little anxiety of wanting to do more, to do better, to develop more, to improve the writing style, to make sure the overall piece of music is as accessible as it can be. So yeah, there's a little of something. Some of that goes in there, as far as I'm concerned.
And you also do a lot of clinics in these academic settings. What misconceptions about spirituals do you often encounter in these academic settings?
I think that one of the things is, especially if someone is not is not African American, is not Black, sometimes there's a little anxiety they have about whether or not they are or should perform this music. I do still get that, and it comes through. So one of the things I try to do as I'm working a clinic in a choir is to diminish that thought process and to reconfirm that music is for the people. I'm not I'm not German, but I love Brahms. You know, I love it, a good Italian art song. I'm not Italian, and I think music is for people. Music is for the people, regardless of the genre. So I try to dispel that right away and say, let's sing this genre as effectively as we can, and our skin color is really irrelevant.
Yeah, that's really powerful there. Uh, how has your time and work, specifically in Michigan, shaped your voice as a composer and arranger of spirituals?
Well, it was very, very poignant to me because when I decided to see what could really happen with my music, Trevor, I was just trying to connect myself with great conductors and teachers in this area to just get them to sing it. And I didn't know how it was going to go over. I didn't know how overall it was going to be perceived. Probably the most poignant is my good friend Dr. Eugene Rogers at University of Michigan, and he contacted my high school choir director about, you getting this music from Stacey Gibbs that nobody else has. He says, and we just want to know, who is this person? And a lot of conversations ensued after that. But that's when he connected me to some of his colleagues in California. And I think several months after he made that connection, I was preparing my first piece of music to be released. And it was just an amazing time. I'll never forget my first piece of music over him. We are still just good friends now, and I love to be able to work with this guy. But he's just an incredible musician. But yeah, that's something. And I even remember the follow up to that, Trevor. The follow up to that was after we did the first piece. My publisher says, "Okay, what are we doing next?" I said, "Well, we already did that." And he says, "Stacey, you do realize that this keeps going?" I said, "Nobody told me that. Nobody told me that you were supposed to keep going." And so I always remember that period of time. It was just a great memory. So that was the beginning of my compositional life.
So, with that in mind, do you now see yourself as part of a lineage of Detroit, Michigan musicians that includes musical figures such as Brazil Denard and Brandon Waddles, both of whom I'm also studying as part of this recital?
Sure. Do I consider myself Trevor? The best way for me to answer is that I'm honored that I'm even put in categories like that. It's not an expectation that I have of myself, because the music has to always be better than the person even who penned it. And its impact on the choral art form is first and foremost the person that's doing it. That's good, and to a degree, I believe that has a role to play in it. But it can never be greater than the impact you're trying to give, motivational wise. Bonding with choristers and communication between conductors and composers and singers. Those are the bigger elements that require the most attention. So I don't look at it from that point of view, because I think it's not the focal point, and it definitely can't be mine because I don't believe in that. So I just happy and honored to be mentioned.
So, what sort of advice would you give young composers, conductors, and performers who wish to engage with the spiritual in a deeply reverent and respectful way today?
I believe the first thing is you must, and I emphasize the word must, you must do your research. Because if you don't totally understand the beginning, especially the American formation of the spiritual, how can you build on that and you don't apply it to it? It has to be at the core of everything you do. No, I love a good ninth chord. I love a good ninth chord, raise the fifth. I love it. But you have to ask, if you're going to use those chords, you're going to use those progressions. You can't use those at the expense, in my opinion, of compromising the overall integrity of the spiritual, which is basically was done in, you know, chord one, chord four, chord five. You might get a six in there incidentally, and then you're going back to the, five and tonic. I think those are the elements that give it its recognizability, and I think it just ensures that the core of the spiritual stays alive. And I know we become, you know, we become evolved in our professions, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think merging the two is the best formula in the evolution of the spiritual.
And what do you hope that audiences and performers take away from the work that you've done with the spiritual?
Hmm. I'd like to wish that they have an understanding and a respect for this wonderful genre of music. Also, most importantly, is they're so engrossed in it and the execution of it that for 4 to 5 minutes they can forget that there's hate and discord in the world and sing as one. That's what I hope most of all.
Yeah, I certainly hope that too, especially as I move into the performance of this work in about a month or so. Speaking of, the piece that I've chosen to set from you is your arrangement of Way Over in Beulah Land. So
Okay.
I've got a couple of questions just about that. So what led you to set this text to music, and what does it mean to you personally?
Well, it's definitely one of my favorites by the great Hall Johnson. And upon seeing that through college, and when this part of my life began to evolve, I was just thinking about what arrangement that I want to do next. And I said, I think I have an approach to Way Over in Beulah Land that I'd like to share. And the back part of that story is, Trevor, I did that in 2006, I believe it was. And I didn't hear anything from my publisher. And I was nervous to contact my publisher. I said, oh, he didn't like that at all. Boy, did I did I blow it. And then a good mutual friend that has become a mutual friend, Bruce Rogers, who's just an outstanding musician. My publisher called. He said, Stacey, we're doing Way Over in Beulah Land. He's doing it with the All State Honors Choir at ACDA in 2007. I said, you got to be kidding. And so I was so taken away from, because I had a little space of time go by that I didn't think that they really liked the piece. And so for all the things that I've been able to do, I would always say that Way Over in Beulah Land was the piece that there was not a courtship and then a marriage. We had to elope because we had to get the music out. So that's the way I always look at Beulah Land. And I guess it happened like it was supposed to happen, because it's been well received all over the world, and I'm just really thankful about that. Wow, so that means next year. Wait, next year is 2027, right?
Yeah,
Beulah
yeah.
Land, Beulah Land turns 20 next year.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, I thought so too. When I look at it, sometimes you go from piece to piece. You're always working on the next project or the next development, and sometimes I don't sit back and say, "Wow, that's not too shabby, huh?"
Well, this piece is frequently performed by academic choirs. I know I performed it as part of my undergrad at EMU as well. What makes this piece accessible for these educational ensembles?
The first thing I would say is it's a high energy piece, and that seems to draw young singers in. I think it has a strong rhythmic layering to it, and I believe that overall it's pretty accessible. The last couple of pages it gets a little high, but that's okay. They can handle it. But I believe that those are just characteristics of the piece that have allowed it to persevere through time. And I think it's a joyous celebratory piece as well. And I believe it's hopeful, and I think it's engaging. And these are the comments that I'm getting from people who have told me. So I'm just quoting people.
So, are there musical elements displayed in Beulah Land that you think are especially characteristic or typical of your compositional style?
I believe the use of the antiphonal approach is I'm probably going to use that whenever I can create something where I have a mix of treble voices. That's something that I like to kind of keep going in most of the things that I do, because I believe that it's a richness to it that I just enjoy hearing and working with choirs. So I believe those are two elements that I'm probably going to always do, and try to give the a good motive, as you know, the solo goes on, and then you have those bulas responding by the alto, tenor, and bassist voices. I think that adds another layer of rhythmic, another rhythmic layer, and I think students like it. At least that's what they told me, Trevor. I hope they're telling me the truth.
I know I certainly do. What would you say, what musical choices separate a great performance of this piece from an exceptional performance of this piece?
Well, the first thing would be the rhythmic element, creating that pocket where the music is not feeling rushed. I think that's very, very important. The other, it would be vowel coloring. We're not singing Randall Thompson's Hallelujah. We're doing something that's different. I think the tone should change to embrace that genre of music. And I think that's very, very, very important. And then to understand that don't rush the music and you're gonna probably be okay. Because energy and excitement can sometimes cause, as you know, the tempo to accelerate. So I believe those are some key elements that you can use whenever you're singing the spiritual. And then to tap in, I think something that I'd like to recommend is, if you're unsure, if you don't have a high experience level with spirituals, there's so many people in the country. Reach out, talk to your colleagues about it, because that's how we learn, and then that's how we learn from each other. And so I always encourage that. I lost your volume there.
Sorry about that. How does this piece exemplify your approach to spirituals?
If I'm going to say I have something that I like to do, and I do it in a number of things, I always try to look for that great introduction, that setup, especially when there's a tempo change. So I often like to a bit of a spiritual recitative at the beginning. I like to do that because I think it's a pre-set up to when the music comes in, the tempo goes, and the energy is up. I like that contrast vocally, and I believe that it gives the choir's ability to sing, and also sing differently, and also it gives the conductor an opportunity to really interpret. When you look at Beulah Lancers, we're talking about that we're going to have a good time. I've heard that presented in so many different ways. And whenever I hear a new way, it's just always exciting to me. So it gives them a chance to give a little uh, conductor expression, because I believe that conductors are also artists. And everyone will not necessarily hear it the same way. So that doesn't make one wrong or one good, one bad, that type of silliness. It just makes it different. And I enjoy listening to the differences.
So I've got one final question here for you to sort of tie everything together.
Okay.
Why do spirituals still matter, specifically here and now in Michigan?
I think they are a constant reminder of where we've been. They are a constant reminder of our growth. They are a constant reminder of how it unifies people. And when it reaches the point where it's not unifying people, then it's time to do something else. But I think it does. And then they're just so exciting to see. And that's why whatever I do, whatever genre I'm working in, I will always do spirituals, as long as the man above allows me to write, always.
Well, that's what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for your time. This has
You're
been
welcome.
very informative, and I know it'll go a long way toward uh, continuing the work that is being done in this genre.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me in to share a little bit of your future success, young man.
Yeah, thank you so much.